Hello everyone, I'm Daniel DeSosa. This is my channel Rodent Slayer. I am a cartoonist and self-publisher. I sell my work at comic conventions. I've been selling my work since about 2012, and I want to teach you how to make money at comic conventions. A lot of artists are telling me that they're just happy to barely break even at comic conventions, and I don't think that's right because there's a lot of customers at these places. There's a lot of potential new fans for your work, and I want to help you reach them in the best way possible. I want to share with you a bunch of different tips just based on my own experience that's worked for me. I know that everyone has different sales techniques that work for them. I'm just giving general advice. And I also would like to say, I know there's a big thing about copyrights and fan art and a huge argument about that. I personally do not sell fan art of IPs I don't own. I have nothing against people I do. And if you want to do that, go for it. That said, here are my tips for how to make money at Artist Alley comic conventions using your own work. The first tip I have is to make sure you have an appealing product display. Because look, what you have to remember is when you're at a comic convention, you're not just competing with everyone in Artist Alley. You're competing with all the cosplayers walking by. You're competing with the pro artists who have millions of fans. They draw Spider-Man or Batman. You're competing with the video games. So you have to make your table stand out and look appealing to people. One basic tip I have is height. Height matters a lot. Have tall, clear signage. Stand your books up. Don't just lay them flat on the table. If you have shirts or prints or other products, make sure they're high up so people could see them. There's this subconscious thing. Like if you go to fast food restaurants, you'll notice that the menu is always above the people. And it's because when your head looks up, you just feel happier. It's a subconscious thing. Like when you're looking down, you're sad. When you look up, you're happy. So height matters a lot. Make sure also that your table is clean. Like you don't have trash and food and a dirty tablecloth. Make sure everything's organized. Research product design. Just look what works at bookstores and apply that to your own table. The next tip I have is basic common sense, but you'd be surprised at how many artists don't follow it. Be friendly and personable. Unless you're making genius art, customers aren't going to want to buy a book or a print from some random jerk who's just sitting there behind a book looking miserable and unhappy and depressed. People want to buy from you if you're happy and pleasant. If you're going to be drawing at your table, try to make it so that the customers can see you drawing, because this is a good way to attract a crowd. If you're hiding behind the table and hiding behind a pile of books, it's hard to sell your work and people will just walk past you. At the other end of the spectrum, do not be too desperate. Desperation turns customers off. People can smell desperation a mile away. If you're needily shilling your book to some person who doesn't want to hear it, they're just going to walk away from you. This brings us on to the next point, and that is be passionate and show your passion. There's a difference between desperation and passion. When you're selling your book to a customer, think about all the sweat, blood, and tears you put into making it. Think about how hard you worked and why you made the work. At the same way that customers can sense desperation, they could also sense passion. And passion has the opposite effect of desperation. Passion turns customers on and makes them want to support you and want to give you their money. Customers generally are willing to forgive maybe some sloppy artwork somewhere, or maybe a typo in the book that they see, if they could tell that the person who created the book is passionately in love with what they're doing. And when you're selling your work and showing your passion and being high energy, it rubs off on the customer and they want to be a part of what you created. Another tip I have is to maintain optimism. Don't get down if it's the first few hours of a con and you've only sold one book, or if you've only sold nothing. I've been to so many big cons where from maybe 9 to 12, I get 0 sales. And then at 12 and beyond, it's just a huge rush. You never know. It's generally from 12 to 3 o'clock is rush hour at these things. If you start getting glum and depressed because people aren't buying your book, it's like a spiral, and it'll just get more and more, and then you'll look miserable and customers will stay away because they see you're miserable. Another tip I have is to not get down about your setup. Like if you're not placed where you want to be, or the space is not as big as you expected it to be, just make the most of it. If you're like setting up and starting your con unhappy about your placement or the amount of space you got, it's just going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's just going to convey in your sales. I've been to so many of these cons where I've been shafted in the corner, and on paper it seems like a bad spot. But look, these places get so crowded. Make the best of your situation. Customers are going to walk by. And if you're just inside your head, like upset about your placement and your table space, then you're not going to be selling to those customers as well as you can, and you're going to miss out on the opportunity. So just, again, I will reiterate, be optimistic, be positive, and that positivity will convey to the customer. I've been to so many cons where people complain they didn't make money because of their table space, but I had a way worse table space than them, and I made plenty of money. It's not about the space, and also the space you get is outside of your control, so there's no point being negative about it. All that does is hurt your bottom line and hurt your profits. The next tip I have is to start a gimmick to get over. When I was first going to Comic Cons, my comics were just badly drawn, photocopied, handmade crap, and I didn't even have a sign. It was just like a cardboard box that I got from the con and wrote words on. So my first big con I went to, MCM London, I was tabling with my friend, Sajjan Rai, also known as Childish Butt Vomit. No one was coming to our table, but he started drawing pictures of sloths, the animal. And one guy saw it and said, "Oi, can you draw me as a sloth?" And then he drew that guy as a sloth, and before you know it, we had a big line and crowd of people who wanted to be drawn as sloths. Yes, it is a gimmick. Drawing people as sloths is not why I got into comics, or it's my dream. But at the same time, I don't mind doing it. Another example I'll give you comes from the realm of professional wrestling. So a while ago, well, he's still wrestling right now, but his name is Daniel Bryan. Technically, he's one of the greatest wrestlers in the world, but physically, like just looking at him, he doesn't stand out. So even though he could out-wrestle anyone technically, to get over in WWE, to get the crowd behind him, he started doing these comedy gimmicks, like where he was just an angry guy with anger problems, and he'd just say, "No, no, no," or "Yes, yes, yes." It's a gimmick. But people saw the gimmick and they laughed, and they started getting behind him because he was funny. And then because they realized he was funny, they started to pay attention to his wrestling, and they realized how great his wrestling is. And now he's one of the most beloved wrestlers in the world. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using a gimmick to get over. Of course, if your gimmick is just that you're an amazing artist who makes incredible work, that's fine. Not everyone needs a gimmick. I personally am not some genius Mozart artist, so I used the sloth gimmick for a while, and guess what? I made a lot of money doing it. If you don't mind making money, then I advise you to come up with a gimmick of your own. Other more common things I've seen are I'll draw you as a zombie. That's pretty popular. I'll draw you as a superhero. You know, come up with something that ties into your comics, because this is another good way that you could sell work to people. When they come for the gimmick, and then when they're like talking about the gimmick, you could show them your work, you could show them your book and tie it in. And that's a good way to get customers over. I have this sign at my comic conventions that says, "I'll draw you as a sloth." And it just makes people laugh when they walk by. It helps me stand out in the huge crowd of Artist Alley. So yeah, again, gimmicks are not bad. When you're starting out, there's nothing wrong with having a gimmick. This next tip I have applies to just any form of selling and working in market stalls, in Comic Cons, in fruit markets, or anything. Be willing to haggle, be willing to make deals. You could get a lot more money if you're willing to sell, like, package 2 books together and say, oh yeah, if you get those 2 books, it's $3 off. If someone's like, if you see a customer is on the verge of wanting to buy 2 books, but they're like, I only have this much money, if you know your margins and you see you're going to make a profit that you're happy with, there's nothing wrong with making a deal with that customer. You could get a lot more money if you're willing to make deals with people. Having prepackaged deals and upsells already prepared is a good way to make more money. Just think it what fast food does. Think it what McDonald's does. Every time you order a meal, they say, do you want medium or do you want extra large? Do you want fries with that? Do you want a milkshake? And okay, yes, a lot of people find that annoying, but at the same time, McDonald's is the #1 fast food in the entire world because they have basic business practices like that. And if you're starting out as an artist and don't have much money, I've been doing art for a long time personally and still don't have much money, then it's good to just practice common business practice. Get the money. Do what you need to do. The next tip is basic, but at the same time needs to be said. Be clean and presentable. People do not want to buy from a stinky person in dirty clothes. Some people do, but most people don't. Most people will walk by you if you look like a stinky person in dirty clothes. Try to look good. It's a weird thing. It's a weird psychological phenomenon. Customers are more likely to give their money to someone who looks successful and who looks like they don't need money, and they're less likely to give their money to someone who looks like a homeless bum on the streets. Even though the homeless bum on the streets obviously needs more money, that's just not how it works. So make sure to take a shower, look as good as you can. If you want to cosplay, there's nothing wrong with cosplaying at these comic conventions. It might bring people over. Just try not to be dirty and stinky. The next tip I have is to create high margin merchandise. This means it costs little to produce and you could sell it for a lot. I spend most of my free time drawing comics, which takes a very long time, and then printing the comics and selling them. They actually do not have that great margins. What does have good margins are things like prints that you could print for 50 cents or less and sell for $10, $15, $20. T-shirts, which you could get printed for $5 to $7 and sell for $25 to $30. Posters, and what works especially well for me, because I do these live drawings at the conventions, is live drawings. All it costs is a piece of paper and your pencils and your time. When you're just starting out and you don't have that much merchandise or products prepared, doing commissions and drawings are probably your highest margin pieces. So try to max out your high margin stuff. The higher margins you have, the more profit you get, and the more comic conventions you could attend, and the more you could pump that money into producing books or more merchandise or whatever you want, going on a trip to Vegas, who knows. Also, listen to your customer feedback. I'll tell you a personal example with my work. I make comics about magic three-eyed cats. Now, a lot of people love cats, but not everyone loves cats. And at these cons, when I say to people, do you like cats? They say, no, I like dogs. So what do? I created a coloring book of dogs. And also, I saw at comic conventions that a lot of people loved sloths. So what did? I put a sloth character in my next comic convention. I see what my fans like, and I try to accommodate them. Of course, do not compromise your art or vision for the sake of pleasing fans. But at the same time, in my opinion, it's foolish to discount their feedback. So listen to what the customers tell you. Take everything as a constructive criticism. If some jerk comes up to your table and says, this drawing sucks and looks amateur, take it as a constructive criticism and use that motivation to improve your drawing. So next time, no one's going to say that. Next tip is get a prepared sales pitch down. I'll just give you the prepared sales pitch that I Say for my #1 book, Pravana, I've said that pretty much the same script over and over for years now, and it works every time. Pravana is about a three-eyed space cat named Kitty Jenkins who pops into people's life and sends them on crazy journeys through time and outer space that they don't want to go on. In the end, they learn nothing. Yes, it is a canned robotic speech, but I just have it down pat, and I've found what works. People generally laugh when I say outer space. They laugh when I say at the end he learns nothing. If I could see the customer wants to hear more, I have more for the speech, so I say, I did each page as a watercolor painting because I wanted to stand out from any cat comic out there. So my book is a comedy. That's what works. It's cat puns. Cat fans love it. I found out what appeals to my customers. I created a speech that conveys the message of the book to the customers in as short amount of time as possible. And before you go to the conventions, it's worth writing up and preparing a sales pitch like this yourself. And test it on your friends, test it on random people, see what works. Gain experience from the cons, see which lines work, and then use those lines on other customers. There's nothing wrong with just reciting a script. Sometimes at these conventions, I just go into autopilot mode and I'm just saying the sales pitch over and over and over. But you know what? It works. It's worth doing, in my opinion. The next tip I have is to sell to everyone. Know what your demographics are, but at the same time, realize that you can't judge someone by their appearance or their cosplay or whatever. I make books about cats. The target demographic, I guess, is cat ladies, fans of cats, and they're all ages books, so kids like them. But at the same time, at these cons, I've sold my book to grannies. I've sold them to Hells Angels, biker dudes. You never know who's gonna like your work, so it's worth pitching to everyone. You'll increase your sales if you have the attitude that everyone who walks by your table is a potential customer who wants to buy your book. Again, I make books about cats. Usually my line to people walking by is, do you like cats? And sometimes I've had people say, I hate cats. They're awful. And I show them the book anyway, and they walk away buying it. So you never know. It's worth giving your pitch to as many people as possible. The final tip I have is to create a product that people want that sells itself. It doesn't matter how good you are at selling if your actual work is low quality and bad and no one wants it. Do not blame the customers if no one is buying your book. It doesn't necessarily mean your book is bad, but at the same time, take this feedback and use it to create books and comics that people do want to buy. Always work on getting better. Always work on improving your craft and make every single book you make way better than the last. I hope these tips have been helpful to all of you. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or feedback or constructive criticisms, please put them in the comments. This is Rodent Slayer. Always remember, those who lack imagination are the first to not make any money at comic conventions. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I got more coming up. Have a good one.
Hello, friendly potential backers. I'm Daniel DeSosa, the comic creator behind Oi! Tales of Bardic Fury and Pravana. I have also worked as a digital production artist for DC Comics and an editor for Backwards Bird Comics. I've come to Indiegogo to bring you a graphic novel that has taken 2.5 years to complete. A Song of Mice and Fur. A Song of Mice and Fur is an all-ages epic fantasy graphic novel set in Liania, a magical land shaped like a pooping cat, where cat kings and lords vie with each other for the right to control the rodent peasants. While the cats squabble amongst themselves and sleep, the dogs of the Wolflands, led by Lord Mayor Sad Fatters, are plotting to invade the Neanian capital of Jerusalem and turn it back into Dogstantinople. Meanwhile, the birds are working to subvert everything from the inside, while the rodents begin forming a resistance movement of their own. Can catastrophe be avoided? You must read to find out. In the comic, you will meet many interesting characters such as Genghis Cat, Goddess Empress Cleopatra, Lord Mayor Sad Fatters, Dr. Conspiro, Napoleon, the Panguard, Doggins the Dog, Lady Claudia, Ratsputin, Cardinal, King Hamley, and many more. I'm also offering great perks, such as my sci-fi graphic novel Piranha, this awesome catfish t-shirt, and watercolor pet portraits. The Song of Mice and Fur is appropriate for anyone old enough to read Watership Down and Animal Farm. I have made this book to be an entertaining story that encourages readers to think for themselves. It is not pushing partisan politics or any agenda. It is an epic, funny animal book that was made to be enjoyed by everyone. I poured my heart in the past 2.5 years into writing, drawing, inking, lettering, coloring, designing, and bringing this entire book to life. The book is 136 pages prestige format and works entirely on its own as a self-contained story. The entire comic is completed. I've provided the link for you to read it on Webtoons below. Help me bring this comic to life. Let's get these kitties purring.